My number one is Whiplash from 2014, directed by Damien Chazelle, starring Miles Teller, J.K. Simmons. Like logline, a promising young drummer enrolls at a cutthroat music conservatory where his dreams of greatness are mentored by an instructor who will stop at nothing to realize a student's potential. Very good description, actually.
That is, yeah.
So for me, this movie represents my anxiety about just, I care about the work I do professionally, and that anxiety of sort of not rising up to the occasion for whatever reason. And
Hmm.
usually it's not about what other people are asking for, it's more of what I see myself do. Am I rising up to everything that I set out to do? But then there's also sometimes fear of failure. And mostly it drives me, there's like a deadline and a certain thing at work has to be completed. And how are we going to do it? It's actually a bit of a rush.
Hmm.
But there is like a sense of anxiety for sure that is kind of perpetuating. And I obviously never get to a place where it's totally succumb me and I'm in like a panic mode. I don't think I've ever panicked, but there's definitely been moments where the discomfort is more than what I want. And I'm lucky to be surrounded by friends, family, my own wit or what have you, to kind of then have the toolkit to power sports through that. But
Hmm.
I think it comes from a place of that I care about this and I care about not letting myself and other people who depend on me down, essentially. And I think this movie really ratchets that up in the form of this young drummer who really cares about drumming. He cares
Hmm.
about making a name for himself. He knows that he has something, and maybe that's sort of where the problem is at, because he is a cheeky one himself. But then enters this demonic figure in J.K. Simmons' character who, from his point of view, is really trying to bring out the great of the great from inside these people. But the big kind of moral question of the movie is at what cost? How
Hmm.
much is okay to push? But before I go further, I'm sure you'd watched this movie before.
Nope, never
You
seen it.
hadn't?
Yeah, this is a
I'm
hat trick
shocked.
episode, three new movies. So
Wow.
yeah, this is one that I sort of missed at the time and just never kind of came around to seeing it. And I'm not a Damon Chazelle fan
Right.
at all, so I didn't really felt no motivation to go back to it. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was definitely really affecting, and for me, definitely brought me back to those times when teachers or coaches were using anxiety slash fear as a motivator,
Yeah.
which I don't respond well to that, honestly. Like if they're going to do this, like I actually stop caring and just
Yeah.
pull back. And but some people do, and much like the character in this film, actually, the main character, he is motivated by this and
Yeah.
tries harder and harder and harder. And it's that technique is working with him because he actually is becoming, I think, a better drummer because of the pressure and the anxiety that J.K. Simmons is putting on him. I mean, a lot of the scenes early on where he makes him go back again, know that part again
Right.
and again and again and again. I mean, that definitely reminded me a lot of coaches that I've had in different sports that I play, where it's like, no, you have to go back and do it's the same drill and then drill over and over. Nope, that's not it. Go again. Doesn't matter. Nope, sorry, go again. And I was having almost like PTSD a little bit for some of
Mhm.
those early scenes for sure, but it definitely did, you know, is a form of anxiety where not only as a motivator, but like you said, of like, am I going to be able to accomplish this thing in whether it's a professional setting, or just, sports setting or what have you. Like I've definitely, or academic setting, like I've definitely felt that for sure. Been in the same shoes as the main character in this film, but again, I just don't respond well to that. I prefer the positive motivation versus like
Same.
the Full Metal Jacket style yelling that J.K. Simmons puts in. But it raises a lot of amazing questions. And I think the performance, especially out of Simmons, are just really,
Amazing.
really fantastic.
Yeah, he's like incredible, and we'll get into that too. But yeah, I'm the same way. I don't respond to that. I tune out. Luckily, I didn't have much of that at school, not that I
Mm,
can remember. But there've definitely been, bosses or leaders at work who try to do that, and it's my least favorite thing about working anywhere is
yeah.
when there's a culture of fear
Hmm.
or a culture of, that, oh, if somebody does something wrong, we're going to come after you. It's very clear to me that that kind of way of leading actually doesn't get the best out of the people. And you might be able to put something out the door and maybe even have a win in the short term, but that's going to be very, very short lived. And I get it why people resort to that, right? It's often self-proclaimed type A,
Yes.
very, very capable people. But
Hmm.
for whatever reason, because of their own baggage, their own experiences, or their own ability to sort of dive or dig deeper into how do you actually truly motivate and lead people, the easier way is to harangue
Yep.
and, create a culture of fear and basically make everybody do what you think is right,
Right.
as opposed to approaching things with a very question based or problem based mindset, which then empowers people to then solve. But like you were saying, there are people who do respond to that,
Right.
and we do see Miles Teller's character in the movie really elevating in terms of his craft, like where he is in the beginning of the movie from a drumming standpoint to where the movie ends at this amazing performance that he totally takes control of the entire stage,
Right.
even over J.K. Simmons's character. Like he is now the conductor and the drummer and the main star and show of the entire performance. That arc is incredible. So if you look at that, you could almost justify this kind of behavior. But the point is, somebody else who's a past student actually commits suicide during
Hmm.
the movie. What is the cost of that? And then even in Miles Teller's case, yes, he's crossed the chasm in terms of his craft, but what kind of human has he become? You
Right.
know? And how long is he going to go? Is he just going to play for the next few years and become an all-time great, but then totally fall apart because his mind, body, all of it would be totally ruined? A, and B, how many other people's lives is he going to ruin? Because he's probably going to perpetuate the same kind of way of working potentially. And then relationships and such. And,
Right.
my biggest heartbreaking scene of the movie is when his father looks at him play, when he's bleeding and he's taking charge of everything. And yes, he's soaring, but the father can see it that my son is also, he's transformed into somebody else.
Right.
And I don't know how I feel about that. And that to me, this time, this watch especially, I was tearing up just like watching, as from a father's point of view, what it might feel like to watch his son go through this journey.
Yeah, it's definitely, I'm on the same page with you in terms of this is not how I like to be motivated at work at all. And actually, it's reminding me this conversation back to our very first episode, Work Experiences, in a movie that I
Mm,
brought in, Swimming with Sharks, which is
right.
a workplace version of this. Kevin Spacey plays an agent that basically does the same thing to his assistant that J.K. Simmons does to Miles Teller in this movie. It's interesting, though, to me, because I think this movie asks a lot of questions around, is this right? But through the vein of art.
Mm-hmm.
And for myself personally, art is the only area that I feel that this actually is warranted and okay, because it's not someone's livelihood. They can step away at any time. Artists produce art that is for everybody else. So it's not like a sports thing where the glory that you have is essentially your own glory. And I don't know. I feel like this is a question that is not as easy to answer when it comes to, should you lead with fear to get good art out of people?
Mm-hmm.
I hear these stories. Oh, this director's so horrible on set, or all this horrible set. Yeah, but if the movie's good, honestly, like I'm glad that was what it cost. There was a crucible there that the artist had to get into. And if the art that came out of it was incredible, I think that for me, at least personally, like the cost is not as, I don't care about it as much as if it was a business or a sporting thing or a personal relationship. Yeah, that totally out of bounds. You should never act like this at all. I don't think fear is a motivator, or all the psychological games and torture that he was putting Miles Teller through. There's a great scene when he keeps, oh, okay, you're the drummer now. Actually, no, you sub out. We're
Oh
bringing
my
this other guy. Oh,
gosh.
actually, no, it's this guy. But the whole time he was just trying to push Miles Teller. Those other people were pawns in this psychological game. Again, totally unacceptable. But in my mind, I think in art, I don't know. I think maybe it is if this is a film set or a band or anything related to art. I don't know. For some reason, to me, that line becomes a lot more blurry, where it's very clear if it is every other aspect of society. I don't
Mm.
know. And that's why I thought that question was very interesting, that it was raised. And even at the end of this movie, you're not supposed to think this is some heroic thing he did in terms of, bleeding and taking control and turning into this person we don't know, like you were just mentioning. We don't know. Like the movie's like, I don't know. You make it your mind of whether this is good that he made this decision or not, instead of just totally walked away like he does at the end of the second act. It's
Yeah,
it's interesting. I think it raises some interesting
that's a
questions.
great question. I mean, I agree with you to a point. I think it depends on, to me personally, to what limit, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like ultimately somebody just losing their mind or even losing their life over anything
Yeah,
just
life, I would draw the line on that. Yes, right.
doesn't make
No one
sense
should
at
die
all.
for art. Yeah.
And yeah, this probably a way to kind of really push somebody without kind of totally ruining them. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where I think this gets tricky in my mind. But yeah, as a movie though, like I think this is my favorite Damien Chazelle movie. I think I mentioned this when we covered our LA movies and I talked about La La Land, which I do like a lot, but I
Mm-hmm.
think again, I don't know Damien Chazelle personally, but there is a certain sense of anxiety that I think he just carries whenever I watch an interview of his and such. And I know this movie Whiplash is very much rooted in his personal experience because he himself was either a drummer or played some instrument and such. It's not autobiographical in any by any means, but
Mm-hmm.
I think these feelings of overachieving or wanting to overachieve and not fail and push yourself and the anxiety that comes with it, it just feels like this is something very close to him and he can portray that as opposed to grand feelings of love, which is sort of what La La Land is about and
Right.
such. Like
Right.
that stuff never worked on me because I think it just has to come from within you. Even First Man works actually because it is about a very lonely, highly accomplished person who wants to kind of do a lot, but is unable to express themselves emotionally, really. That sort of still works. I won't
Mm.
even talk about Babylon. It's a
Oh,
whole other
trash. Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, I'm still not a fan of his after seeing this. And actually this movie too felt much in the way that we just talked about with Requiem for a Dream. This does feel like a very young
Oh
filmmaker
yeah,
who's relying
definitely.
on tricks, and it feels kind of forced sometimes that he's trying to push something into the film. It's just I read that this was a short film first,
Right.
and definitely the first act feels like what that film was, and it's I don't want to say perfect, but it's near perfect. It's great. And
Yeah.
then the movie starts kind of getting a little messy when the car accident comes in. I'm like, I'm like, okay, this movie, I'm out of it. Then it
Yeah.
pulls me back in, and it feels a little amateur-y. Like again, it's a director who's just starting out as a second movie, I think. So I'm not faulting him for that necessarily, but I still feel that in his work, in the same way that Aronofsky at his worst, he still feels like a tryhard. And Damien, for me, has always felt like a bit of a tryhard.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
I also got that sense from this film too. So I liked it. I didn't love it or think it's like the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's mainly just J.K. Simmons' performance. I walked away from this being like, damn, that guy, this is a good career making performance. But I agree with you that I think the movies of his that work the best are the ones that are about a tortured genius, because that's what he considers himself, which again, I'm like, dude, like, come on, be a little humble. You're not Stanley Kubrick here or Alfred Hitchcock, or like just take a step back. He thinks he is, and that's why he's trying to do all these tortured genius movies. Even La La Land's a little bit about that too, right?
A
No
little
one
bit,
respects
yeah.
me. I'm so great, but why doesn't anyone realize that?
Right.
Um,
Although I think this movie consciously, unconsciously questions that,
yeah,
which
that's
is
true.
why I
That's
think it
true.
actually works really well in my mind. And then other aspects, like Miles is amazing. Like uh,
He's good
he's
in
an
this. Yeah.
interesting actor. Like we'll see what his career trajectory looks like. But this role and this performance it's quite easy for an audience member, I think, to tune out after a while when you've seen somebody just being beaten down. And I think the performance that Miles gives like
Mm-hmm.
keeps your interest going and doesn't lead into apathy
Right.
or you just totally tune out. And a lot of variation there because what he has to do is be beaten down, but also start to transform a little bit into J.K. Simmons as well.
Right.
Because he is becoming that. So there's these like very complicated arcs that are happening at the same time, which is, I think he plays that so well. And
Mm-hmm.
then the music, like Justin Hurwitz, who's Damien Chazelle's, roommate and collaborator, like all the songs and things that are being played in the movie, they're all original, I think. So a lot of them are, I
I thought
think.
that Whiplash song wasn't though. Like the main
Maybe
pieces
that
they're
one
playing,
is
I
in.
thought those
I
were
don't know
not. But I'm
for
not a
sure.
jazz guy at all. I'm
Yeah,
not a
but a lot of
yeah.
people, a lot of pieces in the movie are
Oh, okay.
made for the movie, and the movie is scored beautifully. I think it's amazing to your point to place this in the art world, in the music world, where this
Mm-hmm.
sort of happens a lot. So, yeah, a lot of great choices made from an editing standpoint and such. So, I'm definitely a fan. Like it's anxiety driving enough, but I actually want to watch it as
Hmm.
opposed
Oh,
to
oh.
something that I just like I can't even watch this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had,
make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.